la bienvenida. Vamos a hablar paz con perspectiva de género. Y creo que este tema, sobre todo aquí en Colombia, hemos escuchado tanto tiempo la paz, y cómo lograr la paz, y cómo trabajar por la paz, y la paz total, y si va o no, y cuál es la mejor manera. Pero ¿han caído en cuenta ustedes cuántas mujeres están dentro de la toma de decisiones cuando hablamos de paz en este país, en donde ya en reiteradas ocasiones se nos ha dado la cifra, el 52% somos mujeres? Y si hacemos un recuento de la cantidad de mujeres que se han visto involucradas en el conflicto armado, sus hijos, la mujer es una pieza fundamental si queremos hablar de una paz en este país. Así que quiero dar la bienvenida a Janine Wichchoki, Woman Peace and Security Representative at the European Defense Network. Janina es la representante de la Red Europea de Defensa para Mujeres, Paz y Seguridad, centrada en la importancia de la participación de las mujeres en el sector de la seguridad y en la construcción de la paz con perspectiva de género. Janina tiene un máster en seguridad internacional por Sciences Po Paris y ha trabajado para la Conferencia de Seguridad de Múnich, el Foro de Paz de París, y ha trabajado con la GIZ. Janina, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. So, before you start, please come in. Before you start, I need you to tell me how should I pronounce this? Because I did it like horrible.
No, but it's perfect. It's like they said.
I did it horrible.
GIZ.
No, but I want you to pronounce this.
Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit.
Yo les dije que no era sencillo. O sea, de verdad, no era sencillo. Janina, thank you for being here. Thank you for talking with us about this important thing, more here in Colombia.
Gracias.
It's a really, really important issue to have this conversation with you. Les recuerdo que las personas que necesiten traducción tienen en la parte de atrás del salón los equipos para poder hacer la traducción. I was reminding that they have to translation, okay?
Thank you. Mil gracias por tenerme hoy aquí, if you say so. Estoy muy feliz y muy honrada de participar en este único evento. And I'm so sorry that I have to switch to English now. I'll promise you I'll learn some Spanish. I would like to use my time here today to talk about or to shed light on the crucial topic of women in peace and security. I think especially in these times of extreme uncertainty due to so many ongoing crises and conflicts around the world, it is really paramount to shed light on these topics. Research has actually found or shown that the larger the gender gap, the higher the likelihood of intrastate and interstate conflict. So peace and security really hinge significantly upon the participation of women and on the inclusion of women in all peace and security spheres. So why is that so? I mean, for all of us here, this is pretty much common sense, but I think it's still extremely important to have these conversations because, it's not common sense for everyone in this world, and also to give these topics more visibility. I think the most important fact to have in mind when talking about these topics is that women have the fundamental human right to participate in public life and thus to participate in all kinds of decision-making processes, in political processes, and thus also in peace processes. Women account for half of the world's population, as we know, and if half of the world's population can't have their say as equals, then no society will ever be able to fully attain its potential, and peace and security become very elusive and can't be ensured. And on top of that, or I think, first of all, this is really due to the fact that men and women have very different life realities in general, but especially when it comes to conflict situations, because as we've heard in many different speeches, conflict has a very disproportionate impact on women and girls, coming with very specific challenges such as sexual and gender-based violence, forced displacement, but also very limited access to healthcare and education. And so failing to acknowledge and then to address these very specific needs really leads to the fact that this part of society, half of the society, can't get the security they actually require. And on top of that, the exclusion of a big portion of society really leads to the fact that or erodes trust within communities, which is a big problem, first of all, when it comes to political decisions, because people who feel their needs are going unrepresented will have a very hard time to accept political decisions. And this is also a very big problem when it comes to the important work of security forces. Because communities affected by conflict often experience, of course, fear, trauma, and loss of trust in security forces, and having more women in these security forces can actually rebuild trust within communities, and also bridge the gender gap, and therefore lead to better cooperation, better collaboration, and even better information sharing between local communities and security forces, which is actually essential for effective conflict resolution and conflict prevention. So I also wanted to quickly go into some facts which I think are super important when talking about women in peace and security and women in peace building. Actually, studies have found that the participation of women and the inclusion of women in peace processes or peace negotiations has a positive impact before, during, and after conflict. And their participation increases the probability of a peace agreement lasting for at least 2 years by 20%, and for an agreement to last for at least 15 years by 35%. And on top of that, studies or analysis of different peace processes since the end of the Cold War have found that where women had a very strong influence on peace negotiations, an agreement has almost always been reached. So all of these findings really, I think, underscore the significance of having the peace or the women in peace and security discourse, and also the agenda, an agenda that really emphasizes the need to include women in all aspects of conflict prevention, conflict resolution, and peace building. And there has been a lot of progress since the Women, Peace and Security Resolution has been adopted by UN member states in 2000. But in major peace processes between 1992 and 2019, only 6% of mediators were women, only 6% of signatories were women, and only 13% of negotiators were women. So there still is a lot to be done, and I think this is especially due to the fact that even also within the women, peace and security discourse and even the agenda itself, there is still a lot of room for improvement. And I'll give you just some very quick examples of the most sustained critiques of the women, peace and security discourse and the agenda. So first of all, there can be found an overemphasis on victimhood, on everything that's related to protection of women, related to sexual and gender-based violence, and all these kind of great issues or big issues. And while, as I said before, it is extremely important to acknowledge and to address these important issues, having a sole focus on protection and victimhood could lead to, could undermine the authority of women and even lead to the reinforcement of existing stereotypes. And then a second very interesting critique, I think, is the fact that there's a frequent coupling of women and youth or women and children, which can lead to an overemphasis of the notion of motherhood, which then, or instead of elevating women as agents, as real agents of all social, economic, and political spheres. So those are two important critiques that have to be recognized. And I think a third very important critique is the one that women are always seen as, like in the security, peace and security context, as inherently peaceful. And there are, of course, many examples where women act as informants or even combatants in insurgent and armed groups. And so excluding them or thinking that women are only victims of war and inherently peaceful, while of course they can be very peaceful, but doing this leads to the fact that, well, once again, they are not being taken seriously, but also to the fact that they are being excluded from demobilization and reintegration processes, which are extremely important for effective conflict prevention and conflict resolution. So I think in order to truly ensure a full and meaningful inclusion of women in all aspects of peace and security and conflict prevention and peace building, the whole discourse of the Women, Peace and Security agenda and the discourse and the agenda itself would need to shift from an overemphasis on victimhood, on protection, and other related issues to one that rather puts greater stress on empowerment, because I think with empowerment then of course comes protection as well. And just to conclude, I think, like I said before, one should always have in mind that the recognition of the importance of the integration of women in all spheres of security and peace is a fundamental human right, like I said before, and this is not only important in order to empower women and in order to make sure their voices are being heard and in order to bridge the gender gap, but also in order to build more inclusive and peaceful societies and in order to ensure peace and security. Yeah, thank you. Oh, it's fine.
Thank you.
No, I just wanted to say, because I'm representing the European Defense Network, and just very quick, this is a network of young professionals connecting to not so young professionals from the peace and security
So you're
sector.
telling us not so young professionals?
No, I mean, you know,
I'm just joking.
you have all kinds of ages, and yeah, we're working on making the peace and security and also defense sector more sustainable and trying to bring together people from all around the world to address these topics and talk about that.
Thank you, Janina. Thank you. We really appreciate that you have been here with us in Colombia.